This is my review-ish of the book The Astaires by Kathleen Riley, published in 2012. This is a pretty slim, slender book, like Fred Astaire. It has around 200 pages. It's very focused, very concise, very concentrated, really focusing on what's important. I found it very easy to get through, very interesting. I definitely liked the book a lot. I've read a few reviews, of people who have read this book, and some have criticized the language of this writer. Some have said that it was still that the language was too academic, and that the book is too dry, and it reads like an academic text. Personally, I'm not an academic person, never have been. I'm a person, if anything smells of academia, I usually run away. And this has to do with the fact that I come from a very academic background, and it's something I have always rebelled against for different reasons. So I'm really quite allergic to anything, to anything academic, and I'm definitely allergic to academic language, overly academic language. But having said all that, I did not have a problem with the language in this book at all. It is high English, and she does use big words, and throws in the occasional French or Latin expression, something that Fred Astaire would have hated. I know he hated pretentiousness, but there are two reasons why I didn't have an issue with this language. First of all, it never comes across like, the language never comes across as somebody trying to brag. The language never seems, to be applied to impress. It never comes across as somebody, going, let me show you all the fancy words I know that you have to look up in the dictionary. It never comes across like that. It never seems snobbish, To me, this book was written by a highly intelligent person who loves language, loves words, and yes, has a strong academic background. But the reason why it didn't bother me is because throughout the book, at all times, underneath it all, you can feel a strong love, a strong passion, and a strong emotional connection to the subject matter. She writes right at the beginning of the book that she was introduced to Fred Astaire when she was a young girl by her grandmother, and ever since she was 10 years old, she was interested and fascinated by all things Fred. And as somebody who always responds to the emotional content of something, this was easy for me to connect to, and this is what got me through. And now that sounds kind of like I needed something to help me get through this book. Not at all. For me, it was a very smooth, elegant book, easy to get through. It does have, like I said before, it does use big words. But I would rather read a book by a very intelligent person than by an idiot, So this book focuses on the professional and the personal relationship between Fred Astaire and his sister Adele, who was his first dancing partner. They started dancing way back around the turn of the century, when they were just small kids, 20th century, when they were just small kids, and had a long career of almost 30 years. First, in small-time vaudeville, then big-time vaudeville, and eventually, they became stars on Broadway and conquered the West End in London, and they were a huge sensation. um, it's hard to understand, you know, in this day and age. I think it's really hard to understand just what a craze there was about them, because we live in we live in times that are so celebrity obsessed, and so it's kind of hard to really get an understanding for the dimensions. But they were, people were just crazy about them. Somebody even coined the term hysteria, for hysteria for Astaire, and they were, they influenced, popular culture and fashion, and they were just really, really big. But of course, there exists no footage of them dancing together, so which is why people don't really remember that partnership anymore. So because of that, I think it's really nice that this book exists, and 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 highlights that big part of Astaire's career. It wasn't just a few years. It was a long partnership and over a long time, and they went through a lot together, because they struggled, and they went through a lot. So it's nice that this book exists. As far as I know, nobody has ever written a book on that partnership, and it's nice for people. There are people out there who have an interest in Adele, so it's nice, I think, that this book exists that focuses a lot on Adele, almost more than it focuses on Fred, I think. Which didn't bother me, because he, he's Fred Astaire. He has people write about him all the time, so it's nice that she gets some recognition too. Something else that other people seem to have criticized is that it focuses too much on their professional lives and not enough, on their private lives. I guess some people were expecting some dirt or whatever. I feel it has a pretty good balance of both. It is focused on their professional life. It's clear that that's the idea behind it. But for me, at least, it offered enough personal, insights into the personal life of these people, particularly Fred. But I guess I should say that I'm pretty grateful when it comes to these things, because it's so hard to get any insight into Fred as a person, because even though he had a career of almost 80 years, he almost never gave interviews. Actually, the first proper interview he ever gave, he was 76 years old, and even when he did give interviews, he never talked about himself. He hated to talk about himself. And then, in the 50s, he wrote his autobiography, and he somehow managed to write an entire book about himself without actually disclosing anything about himself. It's quite, that book is like a masterpiece in introversion. It's quite extraordinary how how a person can write an entire book without opening up. So any information, any little thing I learn, any little insight I can get into his life, into him as a person, I welcome with gratitude. And she has had, the writer, went to the Boston University, where there's an archive that has a lot of stuff, letters that Fred wrote to his sister, letters he wrote to his mother, and she also read the diary of his mother. So she had, I don't think I've ever read a book written by somebody who dug that deep and went into these archives, and so knowing that, knowing that she had that access and that she read personal letters, which are she shares some of these letters that Fred wrote, and they give you such an insight into him, into his personality and character. So knowing that she saw so many letters, and when you know that, you kind of think, yeah, it would have been nice if she would have shared a little more. But in a way, I kind of think, I kind of respect that she didn't exploit these letters, or these diaries. She could have, any other writer might have written a much more sensational book, and thought, oh, I'm gonna dig up very personal things. It would have been easy to do. So I kind of respect that she kind of respected their privacy in a way, and really focused on their professional career, without without denying you any insights. I feel that there's enough there. It's much more. You will learn much more about Fred Astaire than you will ever learn, you know, reading his autobiography. So I learned personally, even though it's a slim book, I learned a lot there. I got a lot of new insights. Even though it's a slim book, I feel there's a lot of information packed in there. It's just very, very focused. I know a lot about Fred Astaire, so it's anything that can offer me further and deeper insight. I will is like a treasure trove to me. So I really, really like this book. Something else that other people have criticized is that it kind of that it focuses not that it doesn't focus enough on Fred and Adele, and it talks about events and other people who were of importance at that time in the theater world of the of the 20s, and kind of like some people feel that wasn't necessary to mention other people. And I personally didn't have a problem with that at all. As a matter of fact, I really loved that because it wasn't just talking about their partnership, but it was also highlighting and giving you a feeling for that time when they were active, and that world. It simply gives you a feeling for that world that they were living in, and Broadway in the 20s with these interesting characters, and who which other names were of importance back then, which other people have influenced that time. And I really personally love that because it made me it gave me a feeling as if I'm there. I read this book largely because I want to get a feeling, because I can't time travel. That's really the reason why I read books like that. I so desperately want to go to that time and place. And one of my biggest fantasies is seeing Fred Astaire on the stage as a young man. And just this is the closest, reading books like that is the closest thing I'll ever get to experiencing that. And the more somebody captures the essence of that time and the atmosphere of that world, the more it becomes an experience rather than just a text. And I really, really got that out of that book, so much so that I really, when I was finished with this book, I cried for about an hour because it was so, I just felt so sad. I just felt like I had gotten such an insight into that world, and it really felt like I had, traveled back in time, and now I have to face reality again. And it's also a thing with, because I love Fred Astaire so much. So every time I finish a book on him, it's like a goodbye of sorts. And every book I read on Astaire ends the same way. It ends with him dying, and I don't like that. So, but I think that it really, really, really captured that their world, and what they went through, and the relationship he had, very special, close relationship he had with his sister and his mother. And then later on, he falls in love, and both his sister and his mother, they are so possessive of him. They don't want to let him go to this. They don't want him to marry, and his personal struggles with that, and you know, trying to please all these different women in his life who were all extremely possessive of him, and that comes through, so that's something that is very personal, about him, that comes through very clearly in a few letters that she shares in that book. So yeah, like I said, I'm sweating. I'm sweating because I have the flu, and I'm wearing a thick scarf, and I've almost strangled myself. Now I'm really, really hot. So yeah, I think that the book was quite the fact that it gave you a little bit of insight, but never any dirt, I think is quite in sync with Astaire's attitude, and with the way he went through the world. I think you would like this book, actually. So yeah, and I liked it too. I hope I covered everything, and said everything that like I said, it's I really love this book, but it's not a book that I would recommend to somebody who has no knowledge of Astaire, because it doesn't, like, it's really completely focused on his relationship with his sister. Like, it barely mentions that afterwards he went to Hollywood, and it doesn't talk about his film career, or his work with Ginger Rogers. It doesn't talk about any of that. It's really about him and his sister, being born in Omaha, Nebraska, and moving to New York, and their partnership all that time before he got into film. So this isn't a book for somebody who wants to know something about Fred Astaire, but this isn't the sort of book that people pick up who have no prior knowledge of Fred Astaire. Like, I don't know who would, you read this book because you already know about Fred Astaire. So for those people, I think it's extremely valuable. I really I learned a lot, and I got to see more of Astaire. I definitely have more a clearer picture of him as a person. So yeah, I definitely liked it.